this tab down here. I want to mount that in the vise. There, it started going in there. To go in easier than that. There. Needs to be out far enough so that you can get the snap rings on. That's about right. One, the bigger one on. I can tap them out until the rings or snap rings are all the way against. I'm going to put this plate on, which locks that thing into place. So let me get some shift forks on here. The upper one in there first. Now you gotta put the second one in. Before you put the second one in, you gotta put the interlock pin up in there. So I'm gonna do that first. Okay, interlock pin, the longer one. Try to get it in there. There, that's better. Yeah, make sure it gets all the way up in there. Shouldn't be able to move this shaft right here. Okay. See, that one has a hole going all the way through for the next interlock pin. And I turn it so that these three things here are facing the same way. That way you know the hole is free. Plus you can just stick a drift pin in there and make sure that it goes into the hole. Get in there. Guess it's in there. Yeah, it was in there. So now I can put the middle, which is a little bit shorter. Okay, I got it in there. One before the shaft. Now distance from the bottom all the way up to the interlock, when you shove a grip pin in there, should be about 3 1/8 inch. Stick the bottom shift fork shaft in. And I'll put the shift fork pins back in. Okay. Well, that's it for today. I hope you heard something you like, and I hope that you enjoy some live music Okay, shift forks are installed. Before we put this case on, I'm going to wrap a wire around this so this can't move too much. Put this case on. Snap ring on this bearing. There we go.
As you look at the judging criteria for figure skating, it's not just talking about music. If you're a pair of figure skaters, you're going to judge on your performance and execution.
Here, make sure that lines up inside there. Make sure that that U-shaped thing is in the correct spot before you put that in. And also, after I changed the bearing back here on the counter shaft, I had end play of about 0.013. I put a different bearing in. I'm down to 0.007, so it's a little better. I'm going to put that little clip on. I think I'll do this one a little differently. Just push it on. I put this ball bearing in, which is about 0.312 diameter. Goes in that hole. The spring follows it. Second hole, spring. Third hole, and stay in there. And spring. Put a plug over the top of it. Before you put the plug on, it probably wouldn't be a good idea to put some gasket compound on them. Make sure they don't leak. .6mm Allen screw wrench. Make sure they're pretty tight. Now the shifters, the white one goes on top. Like that. This part on the bottom. I don't think you can put it on upside down. You turn it like this, then it won't line up with the pin, the hole for the pin. And this one, the yellow one, goes on next. And I believe that one goes on that way. Pin lies up. On with that side up. Make sure that thing moves up and down before you put it in. If they're stuck, you got a problem. It ain't gonna work right, so there's no use putting it on. It ain't right. I forgot to show about this part here. There's a little ball bearing that goes underneath here on the shaft. Put that on first, then slide this on, which is your speedometer gear. Then there's a clip here, a C-clip, press it on. A C-clip there, press it on. I notice some of these C-clips vary in thickness, so make sure you get the thickest one. You know, they'll fill the gap. I ran into a slight problem when I was trying to put this together because right here I used too thick of a C-clip because I've got a whole container full of them. And I picked one that was a little too thick. So after I put this on and then slid the gear over this, which is this one, I couldn't get there wasn't enough room down there to get the C-clip in. So I have to take that snap ring off and put a thinner one on there. So, you know, if you're doing a transmission all by itself, you wouldn't have that problem, probably, because you would only have one clip to put in there. But since I got this whole bin full of them here, I just picked the thickest one. That was a big mistake. We're going to try to get this case on there again. That little ground off area goes on top. Set that in there. Kind of looks like that. Get this out of the way just temporarily. Get that in there. Put it into the shift dogs. Don't forget to put this bolt right in there. And this long one goes up inside here. The rest of them are on the outside. Then I slide this gear in and line the synchros up with those notches. Line the synchro notches up with the detents inside there. Alright. This is the four-wheel drive. Connects the rear extension housing gear. And that slides in there. Make sure you watch out for the four-wheel drive. It slips in that notch there as you slide it in. Now I just got to put the snap clip on there. This is the four-wheel drive lever, and there's a tapered pin, and what I usually do is heat it up, heat it down here below the pin, a little bit on top of the pin, until this is pretty warm to the, and then I use a copper or brass mallet and just hit the end of that thing a few times. I put the nut so it's just a little bit of the stud is sticking up, so I'm hitting the stud, not the nut. I think it's yeah. See, it's tapered pin. There's a washer, and that's that seal right there. I want to get out of there. I want to replace it. I think it's been leaking. When I put this shaft in, it's got a flat spot on it. Flat spot goes down. These grooves go up. And when you push it in, you want to put this unit in. Before you do it, push that pin down and make sure it goes down freely and it's not stuck. This passes through the shift fork. And then into this unit. And this bolt with the lock nut on it. You want to make sure that the snap ring is reshaped. So you kind of take channel locks and squeeze it so it's back into shape before you put it on. And then when you do put it on, just don't expand it too much, just enough to get it on there. Yeah, that one went on really good. Feels tight. This is the oil pump. It has a reverse thread. So to tighten it, instead of turning it like you normally would, you reverse. You turn it counterclockwise to install it. And we'll tighten that down. I'll have to put the input shaft in temporarily. Here you can see I clamped the vice grip on the input shaft with some tissue paper to protect the spline. So anyway, I wedged the vice grip on this shaft, so now when I push down on this, the shaft doesn't turn. I get snugged up. It takes a 17 millimeter. Okay, this hole right here goes a .31 diameter ball bearing, and the spring-loaded, metal shrouded spring inside goes over. And then this plug, which is one of the bigger 6 millimeter Allen wrench plugs. I like to goop them up with some non-hardening gasket compound. Just put it on the threads. I'll keep it from vibrating out. And give it an oil seal at the same time.
I was a bit older than Mozart when I auditioned for the Munich Opera.
Just give it a tap. Sure, it's pretty tight. This plug here goes in this hole. See, I'm missing. It's got a little white plug that goes on it. It's missing. It should still work. And this is a switch to tell it when it's in four-wheel drive. Lights up a light on your dashboard. It takes a 7/8 wrench to tighten it down. Make sure it has a washer on it. Okay, in this hole, it kind of pushes down on this lever off of this shifting arm here, the lever that goes over here. It keeps it down. So you drop that in there, and you drop this spring. And on top of it is it's a 24 millimeter or 15/16 with a hole in it for the spring. And there's no washer. Tighten that down with a 15/16 or a 24 millimeter. Stuffed a little tissue in here and have a ramrod for a gun. You're going to push it all the way through. It goes all the way through to the end of the shaft. So you cleaned out some debris in there. I'm going to tighten down this 12 millimeter. And then there's a lock tab. That worked out all right. I did the whole thing with the pliers. Now we want to put the extension housing on. This is the transfer case. I checked this seal here. I mean, there's no oil in here when I took this off, so I'm going to assume the seal's good. I slid the shaft in there and it felt pretty snug. I'm going to make a check. I got the snap ring on there. Shaft, the flat side is down. I got that tightened up, which is your oil pump, which goes into that hole there. Slip that on. This is probably the easiest part of doing these transmissions, is putting this on. The bolts that go in to bolt the extension housing on are about 1 3/8 long. Before tightening down these bolts, I recommend you take it out of the vise. This is getting out here quite a ways from the vise, putting a lot of stress on that little bit of aluminum that's holding it. So we're going to take it down, set it on the workbench, tighten those down. Well, it's a little easier just to tilt it on its side like that. At the end of the transmission down there, create the leverage. Should be pretty snug. At least probably 20 foot-pounds, I think the FF factory service manual calls for. This goes in here, And you should check it, push down, make sure it's spring loaded still. Make sure it has a washer on it. And a 1 1/16 wrench will tighten her down. Next part will go on and be the shift lever. It goes on the end of the shaft. You gotta push the shaft forward before you can get it on there.
Jonas Kaufman sang with the San Francisco Academy Orchestra conducted by Antonio Papano. Before that, the Champagne Polka with Bramwell Tovey and the Haba Orchestra.
Lock washer.
All the stories and music about champagne, wine, and beer has made me a little thirsty. Maybe you too.
12mm.
I'll leave you with the famous opera drinking chorus done in Glenn Miller. Join me again next week for more great music and stories from backstage on CBC Radio 2. I'm Ben Hefner. Cheers.
Pair of pliers, which seems to work pretty good. This interlock pin, it's kind of a fat one. Measures about 0.235 diameter, and its length is about 0.454. Once you get that shaft lined up in that hole, you drop that down in there. You have to line up this hole right here to put a roll pin.
When planning Northern Gateway's marine operations, we set out to make BC's North Coast safer for all vessels. That is why Northern Gateway is committed to increasing radar and navigational aids along the shipping routes. The DOD panel agreed and made a condition for approval. One of 209 we must meet before we can build and operate Northern Gateway. I'm Northern Gateway. I invite you to learn more at
I used an oversized punch. Make sure I didn't overdrive it. Now I can drop the ball bearing in there. And the metal shielded spring. And then the cover would go on. And this one bolt has a wire catcher. These are 3/4 inch long, 3/4. This is 1.1/8 roughly. We'll tighten those down, and then we'll put some gasket compound on this large 6mm plug. Okay, I gooped that plug up with some non-hardening gasket compound so I get a good seal, help keep it from coming loose. Tighten her down. Basically everything's done except tightening down these. I'm going to make sure it shifts right, so temporarily install an input shaft. You can rotate it. First gear, second, third, fourth, fifth, reverse. Oops. I can't check the 4-wheel drive because I have to get that seal out of there and put that on. Other than that, it seems to be fine. Okay, the last thing to go in here, speedo. There's a slot that has to be on the bottom. A little retainer tab slits into the slot, and then a 10mm screw to hold the retainer in place. There's a plug that goes in here. Make sure it has a washer on it, 24mm or 15/16. Clean off all this stuff. The magnet that catches debris from inside the transmission. When you get all that off, so it's nice and clean, and then we'll put it on there. Yeah, I cleaned the plug up really good. Say it had a bunch of debris on it, the magnet collected. So you put a washer on it. You're going to use a 15/16 or a 24 millimeter socket. I'm just going to put this on temporarily. I like to have the input shaft out when I install the transmission in the car, and install it after the transmission is in. But this way I won't mix up the input shaft with another input shaft I have lying around. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on temporarily. Here, very carefully drill through the metal 2 1/16 diameter holes. Now I'm going to put some small screws in them so I can pull that thing out. Hopefully it'll come out. Expand the aluminum a little bit where the seal can expand, and hopefully it'll help it come out of there. So just using this as a lever and pushing it, and it came out. Hopefully I can find a new seal for this thing. I ordered some from the local auto parts store. They haven't got them yet, so we won't be able to put that in.